Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This is the much anticipated and very important Santa Cruz section of my story where I'm going to zoom in on the events that happened in Santa Cruz. Some of them aren't so significant, some are very significant. I'm going to try to briefly tie them into other events. I'll try to keep this in less than 4 videos, probably do it within 3 videos or so. I spent hours this morning trying to remember details, what have you, and I was building on a pre-existing list I had, and I try to put it in chronological order, but it's not quite in chronological order. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about from about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, to about 18 years old or so, and then we'll do a period from 19 to 21 or so when I was dating someone there, and the last video we'll do the rest. That's how we're gonna do this. There's some things I'm not gonna remember. I'm gonna say, oh yeah, I should have put that in there, but let's get this done with. It looks like I might be dying soon here. With everything considered, the fumes, the poisons, the exact moves the enemies is making, um, it is kind of interesting right now. It's much better to live the adventure, to do God's work, than to be some kind of boring, just another wasted 9 to 5 life or something. I mean, this is where it's at. Doing God's work, okay, and clarifying the martial code in a way that people can't forget. Now, no offense to the Mexican Mafia or the Aryan Brotherhood, I'm going to have to kind of explain some of their stuff that they might not know themselves. Okay? So we see Lemmy and AB, right? They were said to be aligned at one point. They weren't exactly best of friends, right? Prison makes people racist, what have you. But they have a working relationship still to some degree. So with Lemmy, Leme, right, with a little apostrophe, right, between the L and the first E, and AB, right, Aryan Brotherhood. So the Lemmy stands for the M, which is for Mexican Mafia, for Mexican. I do believe it's also for magic. They're not the main people doing this. I hope they do the right thing and stop serving the state. I hope all gangs do. Okay, they're not the only people. The whole world is led astray by the devil, except for the divine order, those who obey God through me, and no one's obeying God through me at this time, so it's just me. And my parents are blameless. But really quickly, when you put the two together, you can get me e ball. You can get me Bel. Bel is another name for Baal, the main enemy for against God in the Bible, and me a Bel. And also, Bel can mean the Belle from Beauty and the Beast. There's a lot of attractive Serenias out there. Okay, um, and typically in popular culture, the white supremacist women aren't that attractive. The biker females aren't that attractive. No offense to anyone, but this is a part of it, has to be said. And a lot of Serenias aren't that attractive. Some are overweight, some are this too poor looking, whatever. But a lot of them are very attractive. And the white man wants them to all be whores and so on and so forth. A lot of them, see themselves as classy. It gets confusing, okay. Especially if you're not from California or you're not interested in gangs and so on, you'll probably be very confused right about now. But we'll try to make sense of it. Bear with me. Okay. So that's that. And of course, there's a connection with the whites and the Mexicans with Protestants and Catholics. It's a huge part of the culture, the Catholic rosary, what have you. There's the Irish bikers and the Aryan Brotherhood. It was the neo-Nazis, the Irish bikers, and the Satanists, where their stated argument for their criminal alliance. So they have the thunderbolts and the swastikas at times. They have the Irish clover, and they have satanic symbols because there's so many white Satanists, especially here in California, okay, with the rock and roll and what have you, that was one of the major factions that came and made an alliance in the prison system back in the day, and I believe it's been a while since I've looked into this, but I believe it was here in Northern California. It was in San Quentin or something, where the Aryan Brotherhood started. Okay, and again, one of their main groups is the Satanists. Okay, and so when I was a younger person, when I started making my videos in my late 20s, I was like 20. I was about to turn 28. I was 27 when I started making my videos on YouTube. I definitely saw it like I saw it when I was younger. I saw these people as Satanists, as racist Satanists, who didn't want black people to succeed, who were using their numbers like in the old racist movies, to oppress black people. And I saw myself as the voice of reason, hanging around the Crip gang, and I knew Bloods, and so on and so forth. And so there's that. Okay, now let's get to the meat of this video, shall we? So Santa Cruz, right? There's a lot of surfers there, satanic rock and roll, sissies, rich weaklings, what have you. There's some cooler white people mixed in there. Some, there's a lot of Serranos that live there. There's a small group of Norteños that live there. There's some Crips that live there, what have you. Santa Cruz, California, home of the beach boardwalk and downtown events, and it's one of the maybe top 5 most significant places for people to go to in Northern California, which also has the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and whatnot. All right, so point number 1. When I was 6 to, oh no, before I even start, I forgot I was going to bring up that, I have memories on the beach. One was me and my brothers destroying some white family sandcastle, and they're like, hey, and it was a little embarrassing. I do think that these things all have significance to this case one way or another. I have another memory where I'm out there in the ocean, and I used to be so afraid of sharks that I was afraid there was a shark in the swimming pool, and I think that has something to do with mind control. I'd even be in the bath, and I'd be wondering if somehow the drain connects to the ocean, and there's a shark going to break through and get me. So they did things with technology and psychology and what have you to kind of create that fear of sharks. And, there was the Monterey Bay Aquarium where they had this famous big shark that used to swim around. They probably have something like that still. And that shark used to, look at me right in the eyes. Okay. That's how I felt about it. And it had this very demonic look to it, even though it's swimming in a tank full of fish. So anyway, going to point number 1. And I've been going to Santa Cruz, mind you, for a long, long time. I've been going to Santa Cruz since I was like 3 years old or something, maybe even before that. So that would take us to like 1984. Okay. So when I was 6 to 9 years old, and I'm walking around Santa Cruz, right, and they had these rides where you just sit and they kind of take you from one end of the park to the other, and it's like it's elevated, right? It's on some kind of string thing, right, and they kind of take you across, whatever those things are called. And from there is where it must have occurred. Somebody spit and it hit my forehead. And the government has had technology, including back then, to kind of line things up and make it so that, basketball games are interfered with if they wanted to. Make it so that, if you spit on somebody, you spit from far away, they can time it by hacking your brain remotely to land on somebody's head. And I think the evidence strongly suggests that that's what occurred. But one way or another, somebody spit and it hit my forehead. And later on in life, the technology would make my forehead look bigger than it looks naturally. Okay, so if I grow up my hair, for example, it accentuates my forehead and it looks big, and it used to look even bigger on camera. Okay, and I used to not be very happy about that. But if I cut my hair short, it doesn't look so bad on camera, but still looked a little bit big. But in person in the mirror, it didn't look that big. And for whatever reason, that's a part of this, right? They try to make you insecure. They try to destroy your ego. They say things like from out of the darkness comes the light, just Luciferian garbage, just stupid as can be. Okay. So again, I forgot to mention the point of this video is the Santa Cruz is Satan Cruz, scramble, and Satan C ruse. It's wordplay. Okay, Santa is Satan, and I live in Santa Clara County. Okay, and there's a city called Santa Clara. And you have this Satan wordplay there too. Satan, clear A, and in Santa Cruz, Satan, C ruse. Ruse is a lie, and Cruz. The various groups that are involved in this are satanic groups. In fact, every group outside the divine order is satanic. So what you see here is they're trying to emphasize certain groups because they're trying to sensitize me to those groups. They're more important and relevant in my life, and so on and so forth. And we're going to get to certain white groups and Serranos and certain black gangs, and we're going to see how it comes together. And the Norteños don't have a large presence there. They have a larger presence in Watsonville, where they're said to dominate, which is also part of Santa Cruz County, if I'm not mistaken. And the Serranos have a larger presence in Santa Cruz. Okay, I'm not trying not to sound weird here. They're doing some of my voice and my speech patterns, and they also tend to edit it after I've uploaded the video, and I can't remind people of that enough. Okay, so that occurred. Okay, so that I think that's for point one. Okay, for point two, sometimes I'm going to put several points in one of these points because I went back after the fact and try to line up the incidents with the dates. I try to do it in a chronological order to some degree, at least this first part, in terms of the individual dates, the individual points, right, in chronological order. In the next part, when we get to point 15 or so, we're going to see that it's not so much in order anymore because it gets kind of confusing during that time and it has to do with the degree of mind control that was going on, the psych meds, the marijuana usage. It kind of comes to a head there. So, point number two, okay, I used to be feeling the satanic atmosphere as I went to Santa Cruz. Okay, it was, there's a lot of, there was a very popular satanic occult movement in the 80s, and that was during the 80s, right? I was, in 1990, toward the end of the year, I turned 9 years old. Okay, so I was a kid in the 80s going to Santa Cruz, where there was that satanic movement, was very popular. Rock and roll was very popular. Rap was just like starting. It wasn't very popular across the board in certain places like New York and in the hip hop scene, right? But it wasn't so across the board yet until the 90s. Okay. So as I was feeling the satanic presence, and I'm like, man, this world is so evil. Women are so unfair, and they're racist, and so on and so forth. Because again, 1968 to 1988 is only 20 years. To 1985, okay, is only 17 years. So this 1968 is when Martin Luther King was assassinated. So it was a racist environment to some degree, and to some degree, they were trying to kind of leave that racist era while still trying to maintain their racist social orders with the eugenics and the social engineering and the scientific racism and what have you. So I was praying that I was going to have sex before I die because of my experiences, because of females thinking I wasn't very attractive because I was black. And at times, if it wasn't because of that, it certainly carried over to make it so it seemed like it was because of that. And certainly, I did not think that I was a very handsome kid on top of that when I was very young. So that changed about when I was 14 or so. Okay, so yeah. Now, there's also these females at some point around that time, maybe I was 11 or 12. There was these two females who wanted to borrow our boogie board, and they had this kind of satanic rock way about them, but not super tough. Somewhere between exactly the normal average female and a rocker, okay? Mischievous kind of dude, party chick. And later on, I'd see a female who looks very similar um, to what they call the doppelganger when I went to Gavilan College in Gilroy later on, okay, community college. Now, familiar faces is something that initially I started reporting on in maybe around 2011 or 12 or 13 or something, okay, and over time I would be vindicated as other people started to experience these things as well, okay, as as I started remembering the story and who looks like who, it was clear that they were doing something with kind of confusing me about who's related to who, sensitizing me to certain looks. Okay, just like they do with the colors, with the black cars. I've proven that with the gang stalking, one of the gang stalking playlists on this channel, on the Persecuted by Racist channel. Okay, they also do the same thing with familiar faces. So they sensitize you to certain things, the way someone walks, an idea. Say you were sexually assaulted, they bring it up in a certain way, and they do that to create confusion, to use, confuse, and abuse. And so they feel like they're tough, and they feel like they're controlling you, and you're more what they call malleable, more easily manipulated in those states of mind. Okay. So yeah, that had occurred. So now point number three. Okay, this point number three is I was about 10 years old. Okay, so it's around that time, and I'm at an arcade with my neighbor, AZ, is what we call him. My co-defendant in this situation. No, not on trial. I mean, we didn't do anything wrong. So we're there playing video games. Okay, and again, I'm going to tell the truth about this, even if people think it makes me look bad. I'm the top martial artist ever possible. I have nothing to be ashamed of. They've been running a SOP on me my whole life. There's no punking me or getting over on me. I'm going to tell you what happens so you can kind of understand this. Maybe one day this story gets out on a fluke. I don't know, probably not. But I'm going to say it for my moral repetition and to serve God first and foremost and to tell the truth and to humble myself to God, and as I've been doing for quite some time now. and in a sense, my whole life. So we're at this arcade. There's maybe 3 or 4 Mexican kids, and this is maybe 91 or something, 92, 92, 93, and so I'm about 10 years old, actually. So this is 90, um, 91, or the beginning of 92. And, we're playing like Street Fighter 2 or some game like that, right? Um, and so, you put your quarters there. Okay, so I put my quarter there whenever something like this happened or something, and maybe somebody stole the quarter, or something to do with the video game and the quarters or something like this, or the order of who plays, who has next, right? I think it has something to do with who had next in line to play the game. And so we start, an argument ensues one way or another. And one of these guys, he's like a bigger Mexican, probably about 12 years old. He's a chubbier guy. He's got his hat backwards, got a black hoodie on. Strangely enough, the black color there, and who knows why that is. He wasn't dressed like the typical Sereno, right? Maybe t-shirt and jeans. Maybe he wasn't dressed, maybe a Raiders stuff. He wasn't dressed like a typical Sereno, right? Um, and as we start arguing, these 2 or 3 bigger guys are emerging in the background, but they're kind of like, okay, their side has the upper hand, so they're going to kind of let it go. That's the feeling I got. But they look like very serious gang members. They're not the biggest guys in the world. They're kind of got some weight on them, not in that great shape, but you could tell that they see themselves as gang members that back up their set, and it's clear that they're lokes, right? They're loco, right? They're serious about what they're doing, right? So basically AZ says, oh, just let it go. And so me and him leave there. But before that occurred, I forgot that one of these guys said, oh, what are you, a punk or something? And so, as I'm talking about AZ later, if I'm not mistaken, I say, why the hell did he say that? Okay, you can't be outnumbering somebody like 2-1 and they have 2 bigger guys in the background, right? And 2 or 3, and then say, are you a punk? I'm fucking 10 years old. And my neighbor's not that big of a guy, right? He's smaller than I am, right? I think he's 1 year older than me, but he's older than I was, older than I am, and still, okay. But he is not that big of a guy, and these are guys who are fairly, semi-hardened gang members or something, right? Okay. Now, I don't want to make this video too long, so let me just, leave it there. There's not much more to that story there. We just took off, and it seeped into my subconscious. Keep in mind, I'm the top martial artist. I'm Nigerian, the toughest race, the toughest type of Nigerian, the specific type of Igbo, what have you, and I'm the top martial artist ever. So when it seeps into my subconscious, it's more significant than if it seeps into Debo from Friday's subconscious. Like, you're going to want to kind of show the world after that, and you're going to interpret it as groups of people, because it was a kind of a group event, and the arcade was full of people. And for whatever reason, they seemed to be oblivious to what was transpiring. And that was in a place called Neptune's Kingdom. And Neptune is, I believe, the Roman equivalent of Poseidon, who's said to be one of the 2 brothers of Zeus. It's Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, whose name is Pos Odin, which connects to the Norse deity Odin, the father of Zeus and the husband of Freya in Norse mythology. Okay, so I'm trying to, the reason why I'm saying this, because I'm trying to get these facts straight, and, I don't want to sound like a square or something. I know I'm not a square, but, okay. So that had occurred. Okay. Strangely enough, it's almost like that sometimes they try to make it up to you or something, right? Because later on, maybe a couple years later, I meet this, this guy. He probably was a Southerner. He was a Mexican who smoked weed one way or another. I say, hey, where's the weed at? We go to some places, and we're hanging out. He goes get the weed. He hooks it up fat, all this stuff. We hit the gravity bong in the backyard, and I'm a young person, and I'm like, man, that guy's cool. So I'm probably about 14 years older. So actually, probably about 4 years later, and his name was Angel. Okay, so there you had the kind of devils there, and then you had the angel. Right, and you had the Da Vinci Code, the angels versus demons. There's various connections there. Angel from Tekken, who's a female, who is supposed to save the soul of Devil Jin, who is arguably the main character in the Tekken video game series, at least part 2 or whatever. Okay, so he also told me a story about skinheads at a party. That him and his friends, he has a he's probably a Hispanic female friend of his, and they're throwing a party. There's no black guys there, right? If I'm not mistaken, maybe there was 1 or 2. These skinheads were friends with her, and he had warned her before and said, hey, don't be friends with these guys. It's trouble. These guys come into the party, and they say turn that N-word music off, and there's some kind of scuffle, some kind of problem, the police gets called, what have you. He had told me that story, right? And it's significant for various reasons. I'm someone who deals with the streets a lot, looking for weed growing up, things like that, right? Because when I go to Santa Cruz to visit somebody, or for whatever reason, and run out of weed or whatever, or there was a lot of situations like that, because I dated someone from Santa Cruz when I was 19, so I was so used to dealing with the streets, right? And sometimes you come across white people who are racist, but they want to smoke weed and they want to play middleman or whatever, and that that is significant here, because it then connects to these other things, and it's significant in various ways. And the government is watching me the whole time. They were running stops on me since my first memory of it was being 3 years old. Right, I remember I was in preschool, stuff like that, right? At my house, various things had occurred. Okay, let's just shoot through these other 10 points here. So, okay, that had happened. All right. So also, I have some memory. At some point, I was with my mom. I forgot to put that, and I seen a bunch of it. It was like 5 or 6 skinheads or white supremacists, one way or another, and there was this black person was with them, and they're kind of giving him a hard time, and he was like a special needs person. Now I'm sitting in the car waiting for my mom to come back, my white older mother, okay, and I'm like fucking 12 years old, whatever I was, and I was bitter about it. So these incidents are occurring in the same city that I don't live in. It's like 45 minutes to an hour. It's about an hour drive away, actually. Where there's this boardwalk, right, and Neptune's kingdom, and there's all kinds of stuff like that, and there's it's famous for it's a cultist. We'll get into that. And there's nothing I could do. What am I gonna do? So they seem to know him, and so on and so forth. Hey, da da da. It was just it wasn't gonna happen. I don't respect people who think that at the first sign that something's disrespectful, that they should try to take on 10 people or something. Okay, not gonna happen. Well, maybe my mom tries to help me out and shit and gets hurt too. Man, fuck all that. So I had to leave it alone. And you can imagine that doesn't sit well with me back then, and what have you. So yeah, that had occurred here. Okay, so point number 4. There was a time when I used to get weed off the streets. One time, this dude was had $100 to say give me a quarter for $100. Say okay, and that's how much it cost back then. Top shelf weed, what have you, fire weed. And the skater, he gave me his car keys, his collateral. Because I wasn't just saying, hey, take my $100 and I don't even know you. So I said, usually I have him wait somewhere or something, right? So, he gives me these Cadillac keys. Motherfuckers take off anyway. And one of these guys was Hawaiian as shit, and I eventually see him later. But before that had occurred, we were talking about fighting. I said, what do you guys know about martial arts, what have you? And he was like, okay, he prefers American boxing. He didn't just say boxing. He said American boxing. And it turns out that these dudes worked with the police department, and eventually I get caught up later with some incidents that had occurred at the boardwalk. I don't want to get too much into detail about it. It's significant because some of these details are rather, they're going to confuse you about things and so on and so forth. And there's certain issues associated with them. Okay. But make a long story short, I ended up fucking handcuffed with, the cop takes my weed, whatever. Okay, he parades me around the boardwalk. Everyone was like clapping, yeah, because some incidents had occurred where I was kind of paying back the white community and society at large for all the bitch shit that they had done. I think it's connected to the things that happened before. Okay, because remember I was spit on there by someone on a ride. So what had transpired had to do with rides and had to do with me, allegedly, we'll say, putting people in fucking check like you wouldn't believe, and lashing out on the society that was running psyops on me. Okay, so I'm being paraded, and they eventually they let me after they got my number, right? They release me, and then they call my parents and they start breaking down this, that, and the other thing. So I'm in a world of shit, right? Okay, at that time. Okay. So there's that. You can imagine all this stuff as you're being cheated, as society doesn't respect you, as you have to go to the streets for weed. Nowadays they have cannabis club and it's easy to buy weed. People still get jacked, all that, don't get me wrong. But back then lots of more people got jacked from my calculations, except for these cannabis club robberies. I mean, the feeling, okay, it's the way they get jacked, the way they get robbed, right? Jackal and Jack, Jacob, Jack, Obi meaning King Hard Hut, Essence, Seto, Temple, Core, Christ, okay? Can also mean witchcraft to those who are into witchcraft, but I don't do witchcraft. So it can refer, you can say, hey, that witchcraft person who's doing obi, right? Because it refers to the process of cheating me too. And that's part of why Nigerians and Igbos, and other people, they're not on my side. No one's on my side but God. And it's stupid to try to take on God and Christ. Why do you think you're on this planet? To live in the concrete jungle psychological construct with a thong and be like, I know some rich gay guys, so I'm important. That's fucking retarded. Okay. Man, this is going on way longer than I wanted to go, so let me just wrap this thing up. Okay. So, point number 5, there's some UC Santa Cruz females that were obviously some kind of sex cult, Satanists or something, sorority-ish, but more like a witch cult when I was younger that we gave a ride to. Point number 6, there was occult hippies everywhere. Again, this is about defining the satanic groups and my experiences. Point number 7, there's a group called vampires. They wear all black. I really only saw them when I was younger for the most part, almost entirely, in Santa Cruz. There was surfers in hotel rooms that lived by the beach. I remember thinking, hey, I wish I lived there. One of them said that they're in a group and they can't tell me about it, and that's why they live in these kind of rooms by the beach and the group pays for it or something. Point number 8. There was guys who told me, these younger white guys who told me to go to the fairgrounds in Watsonville, pretending to be helpful, acting like it's much better. And the fairgrounds in Watsonville, to make a long story short, are lame. They're nowhere near as impressive as the boardwalk. They're on some bitch-ass fucking white oppressor stuff, not being very helpful. Keep in mind, I'm not racist, I'm part white, what have you. Point number 9. I hate to speak quickly, but I got to wrap this up already. There was occult hippies everywhere. Point number 10. Okay, point number 10, I'm going to have to give it the time and respect it's due. So I'm going to go ahead and make that in the next part here. Okay. I made the Santa Cruz video, right? You see this guy who looks like an OG, right? OG Sereno or something. Shout out to that guy. And this guy looks like an OG Norteño or something. And I think that else is significant. I think I'm gonna throw that in there at the end of the thing, right? This is the same day. I just got done with the video. The first part, and I believe the second part, yeah, maybe like 10 minutes ago, right? So it's the infamous, Mexican mafia, the infamous Arab Brotherhood, the infamous Norteños. These aren't just, gangs that are, local Hispanic gangs and white gangs. These guys are among the most famous gangs on the planet. Okay. I'm not trying to big them up, or not trying to, for this series, I have a neutral stance. I'm not saying that because I saw them and I'm worried or something. I'm just saying it to get the story straight. You see what I'm saying? So real quickly, I left that clip there, even though it sounded like I'm worried or something when I heard the clip. And I'm not scared. They're filming me and they're changing my voice. And you can imagine that it contributes to the frustration of the system, the situation over a long period of time. And it contributes to the background stressors. And it creates a certain confusion. And they're trying to induce a certain state of chaos. And they're trying to take advantage of the chaos and the confusion and create a certain ritual madness, is what they call it in the occult and the Greco-Roman system, the Greek sorority and fraternity systems. Right? Dionysus is a deity of ritual madness, the harvest, grapes, religious ecstasy. He's a fertility deity, a sex cult deity, what have you. And there's, he's also considered a young Zeus, and there's other things there as well. And that's part of their belief system, right? When they're in a fraternity in college, for example, they believe in the young Zeus, okay? And the older Zeus is like an older version of the young Zeus, who's more devious, right? He's more diabolical in his plans, his calculations in regards to a rape system. And his sense of justice is relative to who is interfering with his rape process. And there's early identification, prevention, and intervention that comes into play here, and they're trying to, that's part of why they harassed me my whole life. It's called satanic ritual abuse, SRA, which scrambled is RAS, and ruse is the sun symbolizing God in the Egyptian system, and Ra in Hebrew means evil, and the Bible in Isaiah and elsewhere it says, woe to you who call good evil and evil good, because the Jews were notorious for calling good evil and evil good. And Micah, for example, said that they were all in the wrong, but he filled with the spirit of might and power and the spirit of the Lord and justice, etc.